Hi everyone. In this section, we are discussing about the useEffect hook, which is again a very important one. Now you already know what is a class component and how the functional component works. In the class component, you have various component lifecycle methods. But when it comes to a functional component, you don't have any lifecycle methods. So how will you manage the processes which you use to put in lifecycle methods? The useEffect hook is one of the hook which is handy in such a situation. The useEffect hook is called every time when the component is rendered or re-rendered. The official React site says that if you know lifecycle methods, you can think of useEffect hook as component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount combined. It means whatever process you could manage in these three lifecycle methods, you can manage with useEffect hook in a functional component. To know more, the best way is to start it practically. Here I have the same code where we are changing the counter. When I click on this button, the counter is getting incremented. As I mentioned, useEffect is called every time there is a render or re-render of a component. Let's practically see here. I'm going to add the useEffect hook, and this is how we write it. The useEffect takes a function as an argument. It does also have second parameter, which is optional, that we will see in coming sessions. So right now, I will just add a function here, and I'm just adding a console log. So I'll say console log. Let's say effect called. I can also join the value of counter. Let me refresh. As you can see, effect called. The first time it is 0, but the point here is that this hook is called now. We are not calling it. It is the React who takes care of calling the useEffect. The moment I click on the increment button, you see that every time the counter is displayed and useEffect is called. What is the purpose of useEffect if it is called this way? That we will see in a moment, so you'll get a better idea. Let's open the article shown on the official site. Here it says that mutations, subscriptions, timers, logging, and other side effects are not allowed inside the main body of a function that is functional component. If you observe this code here, this is the area, the return statement where you have the JSX inside is the functional component. In fact, this entire function is a functional component. But the point here is where it says that mutations, subscriptions, or timers, things like this, if you put, then they have their side effects. For example, assume that you are putting the set interval here. Of course, right now I'm not keeping curly brackets. Let me do that also. So this is the JavaScript thing I'm putting inside the JSX. In case if you call the set interval inside the component that is here in this JSX, every time when interval changes something, it has to render. Now in the rendering section, if you try another thing which is already getting rendered, then it is kind of a mess happening inside the component. So as the documentation of React says that few things you put in the useEffect, let's try to implement a kind of digital clock here, and we will try to put it inside the useEffect. In fact, if you have to make a digital clock in React with this kind of approach that is functional component, you have to use the useEffect to make sure that you handle the side effects properly. Let me just first of all initialize the same thing. I'm not changing this counter or set count, or let's just change this. I'll say set time. Let's make more meaningful names. I'll say set time, and I'll name this as current time, C time. The first thing I want is I want to have the current time. So now this is where your JavaScript knowledge comes in picture. So you use the new date. You can also use date.now. That's also a good method, good static method. But at the moment, this will also do. Here, now we want to display the C time. So I'll say the current time I want to display. The next thing is we want to change this method to set time. And we do not want this thing here, right? We will just give this new date thing and paste it in the set time. I'll just refresh the code now. And we'll also comment this. So now when I refresh, as you see that the first thing, the date and time is displayed. Now comes the second point. In case if I click on this button, every time I will get a new time, for sure, the current time that is. But this is not what we want. We want to put a set interval. So now you have to understand, you cannot have set interval here. Rather, you have a place like useEffect where you can put the set interval. So this is the place where I want to have a set interval to be called after every 1000 milliseconds. That is after every 1 second. If you have any doubts in using set interval or set timeout, I have already uploaded the related video in the JavaScript section. Now here what we want is we want to change the time. So we'll say set time, that's the method. And the new state is going to be this only. That is the new date to local string. So now on a click of a button, we do not want the new time, right? We want the new time on every second. Let's refresh this. And now you see that on every second, the time is getting updated. Let me remind you again what official documentation says. It says mutations, subscriptions, timers, logging, such things we put in useEffect. Mutations, subscriptions, timers, logging, and other side effects are not allowed inside this main body. Rather, you have a kind of phase like this one, useEffect, where you can put these types of codes. The clock which we have implemented right now is still not a very correct approach. It has to be in a separate component, and that's what we are going to see in forthcoming sections, where we will also see how do you execute the cleanup code with useEffect hook. Now let's talk about relative questions. So first question is, do you have lifecycle methods in a functional component? Well, absolutely not. Not like the class component at least. So we have the useEffect hook, which can be used to deal with few of the component lifecycle method-like situation. The second question again relates the first question, and that is how do you manage lifecycle methods like functionality inside a functional component? So basically we use the useEffect hook. The third question is what is the purpose of useEffect hook? So we discussed here. You can think of useEffect hook as component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount combined. It means whatever process you could manage in these three lifecycle methods, you can manage with useEffect hook in a functional component. And there can be one exercise or a question that create a digital clock component. So you can refer the entire video and just see how we implemented the set interval inside the useEffect and we implemented the digital clock.